Hey everybody, happy Friday and welcome to today's live stream. We're going to be talking about rest. And essentially we're going to be talking about, that situation where if you're afraid to take a break, you're afraid to take some rest, you're afraid to take your vacation days, but inside you kind of really want to, you feel like you want to rest. This is going to serve as a sort of a pep talk to help you get to the point where you can mentally make that choice for yourself to take some rest. Seeing as we have, we're mid-December right now, we have what for a lot of people, at least in the United States, is going to be vacation time. Some of it, you might have mandatory vacation time where you're required to take the week after Christmas off, regardless of whatever your religious beliefs are. So it's that time of the year when many people are taking vacations or are posed with the opportunity of taking some time disconnecting from work. And I know that from talking to some of my clients lately and from my own personal experience, that this can be quite challenging, taking time away from work. There's a lot of what ifs. All of the kind of worst case scenarios might be going through your mind. So we're going to take a few minutes and just talk through that. So, and really quick, my name's Jen Costanza. I'm a health coach for women, and particularly women who are dealing with burnout, especially the health impacts of burnout. So all about rest. And so the first point that I'm going to make today, if you've got a pen and paper on hand, I advise you to write this down. Work will not love you back. I understand there is a book about this, and I'll be honest here, I have not read the book, but I actually don't need to read the book to be able to understand the point here, and I'll give you my take on it. We live in a capitalist economy. We live in a society where work is in many ways integrated into our lives, where capitalism is integrated into our lives. And when it comes to, operating a business in a capitalist society, the most important thing is profit, which is to say that I know that this can be hard to hear. You might love your job. You might love your coworkers. You might even love your boss, assuming that you're working for somebody else and not necessarily for yourself. But so bracketing that, you are replaceable. Almost all of us, what we're doing at work, we are replaceable. And I think that that's difficult to stomach, especially if you've built up a lot of relationships in your job, especially if, you've been with a company for a while and you've kind of really helped take it from point A to point B and even carved out some kind of a position for yourself. In the end, you are replaceable. And if you were not able to work there anymore, they'd figure out a way to replace you and make do. And I say that with love. I don't say that to, I don't want that to feel hurtful, because we want to have purpose in life. That's really, really important. It's important that you find meaning in the work that you're doing. But is it important enough to sacrifice your personal happiness and your health and well-being? Are you finding meaning in life if you're working so much, and if you're feeling compelled by your work environment to work so much that you can't take off time to rest, to be with your family, to do things that you like to do? Is that really worth it? So that's the first point, is that, I want you to recognize that work is not the end all be all, that in the end, your job isn't going to love you back the way that your family will, and that you're replaceable. And, an addendum to all of that is that I believe that this holds, including if you're working in the nonprofit sector or in academia, where I have experience in. I can tell you one thing is that, now I know not all organizations are the same, but I do know from talking to people working in nonprofits that oftentimes there's a culture of martyrdom where you're expected to work, all hours of the day, all hours of the night, be available, at any given time because you're doing it for a greater purpose that is, in some way serving humanity, like helping people. And so I know that this kind of feeling like this kind of pressure to be sidelining everything else in your life and prioritizing your work life, prioritizing your job is pushed on us, not just from for-profit organizations or businesses, but also from nonprofits. And I can tell you as well from my experience in academia, if you work in academia, you probably know this as well, that even in academia, we are, I think, and I know it can be different in different university settings, but overall, I think that there is kind of a valor attached to sacrificing everything in your life for research or for teaching. But oftentimes it's for doing the research, that what you are doing is above and beyond. It's more important than everything else. It has some kind of, kind of like otherworldly, spiritual, like importance to it. That so much so that, we should be spending our Saturday nights working. And I'll tell you, I think I've talked about this on here before, but I was thinking about this just recently, how in my first year in grad school, my first semester in grad school, actually, there was one night, it was a Saturday. I was working around the clock at this point. There was one night and it was a Saturday night. It was around midnight. I was in the computer lab at the sociology building at Brown University, and a senior professor, all of a sudden, we heard the printer working. A senior professor came down and grabbed something out of the printer and then congratulated me and a couple of my grad school colleagues for really being so disciplined and working so hard. I was so proud of myself at the time, but now in retrospect, I think that's pretty messed up. There's no reason why we should be sacrificing our personal health to work on a Saturday night. At that time, I was also experiencing all kinds of physical bodily symptoms from chronic stress of that first semester in graduate school. I started developing a rash all over, my elbows and like on my joints. I remember this clearly because it felt really gross. But, and one other thing I will say about academia in particular, and I think this could be true also in when it comes to just teaching in general, on the teaching side of things, that we are replaceable. Even when our students love us, we are replaceable. And it's really sad. I think it's horrible that we've come to this sad state of affairs in academia. But I'm in a Facebook group, a support group for people who have PhDs and are exploring or have already left, who are exploring leaving academia to go towards, non-academic jobs, or have already left and done that. And many of them who are kind of stuck in the situation of teaching, oftentimes or almost always in contingent faculty positions, meaning that you don't have job security beyond 1 year. Many of them, and you're making very little money, very little, depending on what schools you're working for. Many of them are afraid to leave their jobs because who's going to teach their students? They love their students so much. They don't want to burden their colleagues, many of whom have permanent tenured jobs. They don't want to burden the colleagues by, accepting a job in the outside of academia that's going to pay a lot more and offer them better working conditions. They don't want to accept that job, but they're afraid to leave and go for that job because they don't want to leave people behind. Maybe I'm getting a little off track here, but it kind of comes back to this main point of work not loving you back. In all of those situations where a teacher, whether it's a contingent professor, contingent faculty, or I would say the same happens in schools. When a teacher leaves, they are replaced. It's sad to say, but in the end, you're replaceable, because in the end, these schools, they are operating just like businesses within the capitalist economy. And they want to squeeze as much labor out of you as they can. So the point is, when it comes to taking rest, I want you to think about, I want you to just start to, if you're feeling guilty about taking your vacation days, if you're feeling guilty about taking your personal days, I want you to just maybe start to question for yourself, where is that guilt coming from, and is it really warranted? And is your job as committed to you as you are committed to it? Your company, is it as committed to you as you are committed to it? Is it offering wellness workshops? And, if it's, if it has a wellness kind of employee wellness program, your company, is it just a bunch of workshops, or is it actually putting, what's being taught in those wellness workshops about, how to avoid burnout? Is it putting it into practice and giving you the time and making you feel encouraged to take time off, to take the time off that is probably in your job contract, that you are guaranteed to have specific, days off, or that you are, only supposed to be working a certain allotted number of hours per week? Are you being encouraged to work to those limits and to take time to live your actual life? So that's point number one. Point number two, and you're going to want to write this down too. You need rest to prevent burnout and to heal from burnout. And you need it before you think you need it. You need rest if you want to prevent burnout, and you need to rest in order to heal burnout. I don't know how much I can actually elaborate on this, except to tell you or try to convince you that this is true. And by rest, again, we're not talking about, you lounging around on the couch or whatever. I'm talking about actually disconnecting yourself from work and having time to do whatever the heck it is that you want. If you don't take rest at regular intervals, chances are that you will find yourself in a situation where you're burnt out and where it is impairing your physical health, not to mention your mental health. Just recently, I took off some time to go surfing, I came back a week and a half ago, because I was getting to the point of, this is basically what I was telling myself. I need to take this rest now so that I'm not forced to take the rest later on. And that's kind of essentially, maybe that's kind of the point that I want to get to here, is that if we don't voluntarily take the rest ourselves, we're putting ourselves in a situation where one day we will find ourselves exhausted, tired, maybe battling an emergent health condition where we're forced to take time off. So why not take it now so that we can have a more calm, easeful life and actually enjoy ourselves, enjoy our life, and enjoy our work a little bit better? And I feel like that might be a good segue actually into my third point, which is you will become more productive and more creative through rest and disconnection. You'll become more productive and you'll be more creative at work if you take rest and if you disconnect every so often. For those of us who are, I think this is actually one of those situations where this really, really applies. I think all these points apply to pretty much everyone, but in particular, if you're working in a job, or if you have your own business, and if you work in a job where you're, especially where you have a lot of flexibility to your schedule, and where you find yourself, working at nights, working on your days off, working on the weekends. When we have a lot of flexibility in our schedule, and I come at this from basically this being my life, pretty much my entire adult life, I've had an extreme amount of flexibility in my work schedule, from when I was, in graduate school to when I was a professor, and then and now as running this business of being a health coach, but also another business that I run as a research consultant to nonprofits. I can tell you that when I'm coming from this position, I've had a lot of flexibility in when I can do my work. And it can be very tempting to do work at night. Just you get in a groove and you just keep going and going and going. Or to feel like to start doing work on a Saturday afternoon or on a Sunday, and it feels, fun. I think it's really tempting. I was thinking something else. I'm trying to have it come back to me. But I think it's, especially when we have so much flexibility in our work schedules, we tend to, and maybe this doesn't apply to you, but if it does, let me know, leave a comment. We tend to, kind of go overboard, and we're doing work all of the time. And the thing is that I think that this is kind of a slippery slope to fall into, because in the end, we're kind of, by doing work all the time and not taking any rest and never disconnecting, the end result over time is going to be that you are less productive. And alongside that, the end result is going to be that you start to get mentally exhausted, not just physically exhausted, but mentally exhausted. And you will become less creative, which is often necessary when you're doing something like running your own business, or if you're teaching, or you're doing anything that requires any degree of kind of independent thought, like creativity. Rest is your friend. Disconnecting entirely from work, this is kind of adjacent, but getting a good night's sleep can really help in helping your brain kind of process what you've been working on and getting you to a better place of, helping you feel rejuvenated and helping you feel like, that you can entertain new and creative ideas. So I think the point here is that, I've kind of given you three main points when it comes to taking rest. And maybe I didn't plan this one, but maybe a fourth point, it's not a point, but maybe an exercise that you could go through with yourself is, if you were thinking about taking some vacation days or taking a couple personal days off in the next couple of weeks or whenever, depending on when you're watching this, and you're kind of afraid of what's going to happen when you take those days off, is everything going to fall to pieces? Maybe kind of think to yourself, write down, get out a piece of paper and write down 2 columns maybe. And, on one side, think about what is the worst case scenario? What is the absolute worst that could happen if you took that day off, or if you went on that week-long vacation? What is the absolute worst thing that could happen? And after you've written that down, I want you also to get really honest and ask yourself, is it true that that would happen? Is it really, what is the probability that that worst case scenario is really going to happen? And in this case, it might be helpful to even bounce it off somebody else. Do they think that your assessment of this worst case actually happening, do they think that that's likely? So that's one thing to think about. The other thing is, look at the flip side. If you were to take a few days off, a week off, whatever it is, and completely 100% disconnect from work, what is the best thing that could happen? How would you feel at the end? How would you feel during, and how would you feel after taking that time off to disconnect and recharge. Once you've taken that time off and been able to disconnect and recharge, how are you going to feel? Like, how might that feeling impact your ability to get work done when you go back to work? I'm not going to tell you the answers to these questions because everybody's situation is a little bit different, right? But these are some questions that you can ask yourself to kind of do a sort of a self-assessment of, what is logically going to happen if I take time off. Are my worst fears going to come to pass? Oftentimes, I think the general feeling here is that we don't want to take rest because we're afraid of what might happen. So I want you to get really honest with yourself about what might happen. What might happen and what would the consequences of that be? Let's say the worst case scenario really, really did happen, even though it only has like a 0.5% chance of happening. How would that impact your life for real? So, summing back up, number one, work won't love you back. So if you're having this fear if you're feeling guilt, not necessarily fear, but if you're feeling kind of guilt of people won't be able to get on without you, I want you to think about that. In the end, this is a capitalist economy, whether you're working for a business, whether you're working for a nonprofit, or whether you're a teacher, you are working in a capitalist economy and you're replaceable. I know that the situation is a little bit more complicated with small business owners, and maybe that deserves its own live on its own, but just taking this point for the time being, work's not going to love us back. See if you can let go of some of that guilt. The second point, if you want to prevent burnout, if you're not feeling burnt out, if you want to prevent it, you really do need to rest. You need to disconnect. And if you are already in a situation where you're burnt out, you're depleted, you're exhausted, it's a mental exhaustion, an emotional exhaustion, and also a physical exhaustion. There's a lot of steps that we take to try to unravel all of that and get back to helping you feel like yourself. But one of those steps is rest. And the third point is that, you have a lot to look forward to if you do take that risk and, step into those feelings of guilt and fear and just bypass them and take a break and disconnect from work. What you have to look forward to is more productivity and even more creativity when you come back into things, with a fresh mind and with a fresh, feeling physically and mentally fresh. There's a lot of benefits to taking that rest. So I hope that this was kind of a helpful sort of pep talk for you if you've been struggling with disconnecting from work and wanting to take time off and you've been afraid to take time off. I hope this maybe just gave you some food for thought. And I want to say that if you are struggling with issues like this, if you're struggling with burnout, if you're kind of already there and you're feeling that mental and physical exhaustion, this is precisely what I work on with my one-on-one clients in my private coaching program, Thrive. It's a 6-month program. We work together to get you back to feeling like yourself, get your energy back. We do that through a combination of nutrition, de-stressing, and, things like this, like rest and helping you insert, pleasure and joy back into your life. Oftentimes my clients experience a lot of times this can be really difficult to do on your own. It can be very overwhelming to figure out how to kind of unravel this feeling of burnt out, how to unravel a lot of health problems that that often develop over time when we're not kind of taking this rest and taking care of ourselves over time. But no matter where you are, it's not too late. It's never too late. And if you'd like some support with that, or if you'd like to learn how I might be able to support you, then I urge you to just reach out, send me a direct message. We'll get to talking. If you're up for it, we'll jump on the phone and we can see if we'd be a good fit to work together and if it's something that I can help you with. So that's all for today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.